Good evening, it's Joyful Christian Hermit. We'll see if my videos work, if it doesn't stop on me like it has been doing. And it might, we'll just see here. Anyway, I'm having a tightening up. I'd been praying for this from God, that He would tighten up my hermit vocation. But it always comes in unexpected ways, seems to me. Mine do when I ask for something that is related to my vocation or my relationship with the Lord. But most definitely, I am not proceeding with Canon Law 603. And I've written to the young priest and also to this chancellor about it. God has made it very clear for many, many reasons that I had to examine. Even back to what my longtime spiritual father, who was a priest for 72 years, he lived to be 99 and 4 months, and considered by people in the area where he had been for 29 years in his retirement at a convent as their chaplain, that really stayed by himself. He was really sort of a hermit figure himself in that regard. But I was very blessed to have him spiritually guide me. And for 19 years, or nearly 20, he also directed and guided, supervised my hermit life. In addition to my mystical life, my spiritual life, plus, I had a bishop in his retirement year spiritually direct me when I was in a location where the bishop was and a little further from my spiritual father, but I would call my spiritual father and at least once a week go see him. But I also then had the chancellor, vicar general, and rector of the cathedral as my confessor for 8 years. And he too weighed in on my vocation, my spiritual vocation, my hermit life. So, in fact, he's the one that really liked my blogging and wanted it to be called The Catholic Hermit. This was way back, I think around 2007, 2008. So, but of course now, with how the canon law 603 has become the norm of the way to be a hermit in the Catholic Church, within probably the last 7 or 8 years, it became very entrenched. I cannot refer to myself as a Catholic hermit, and nor can I be consecrated when I was already consecrated by God. But this is a consecration by a bishop. So, and there were the other things that I have mentioned about the canon law. But I further took some time in the past weeks to research those who are canon law hermits, already approved, and somewhat of the bishops or whoever approved them in the United States, and there were a couple in England, although there's more in England that are canonical approved hermits now. And I just saw a lot of inconsistencies, even in the people who would discern the hermit, the type of discernment, the type of person being discerned, just a lot of variables. And then I had also researched different canonically approved hermits, especially in this country, that you can find online and read about them through articles they were interviewed in or talks they gave, or mostly through articles or through their own writings online. And I noticed a lot of discrepancies in that also, of ones not necessarily in compliance with the canon law. And one even has written about it extensively and very thoroughly, authoritatively, and emphasizes that they must be supervised by their diocese. But this person is not. So, I mean, there's just a lot of hypocrisy. So, all along, it's been over 3 months now, the request to be a canon law 603 hermit. And I did a lot of work. My diocese didn't have a process, and as chancellor asked me to develop one and I did a lot of work on that. And that's been in my professional life. Program development, writing projects, writing grants, knowing how to do reviews of a project once it's implemented, how to interpret even laws, and then how to implement a program and implement a law and interpret it correctly, legally, intelligently, how to live something, a program, for example, or a hermit life, how to live it according to the law, and then how to review. Is it being lived properly? Is it being complied with? And so I did all that work for this diocese. But then I never met the person who was to be reviewing me. And I don't think that person was ever given the process that I developed for the diocese. I had one phone call after 1 month, and it's been going on for 3 months, and I had written a couple of times short, asking just simple questions. One was, what is your time frame for this? Another one, I think, was on meeting with him. Never responded to email. He called once, and that was a very interesting phone call. Now, mind you, I am perceptive. I have this problem, this affliction of being born with mystical spiritual gifts. And so I am very perceptive, and it's been told me that I have the gift of inner sight, but otherwise very perceptive. So on the phone, I picked up things in this phone conversation that he had with me after the first month of waiting, of having turned in my request, which was a very thorough chronological order request, not super long, but probably 1.5 to 2 pages. Thorough enough so that someone could read it and put it in the no way pile, or put it in the yes, we'll proceed, this person has merit. So, anyway, I picked up things in the conversation that was pretty much one way. I listened to the priest, and then I did tell him again about my hermit life and how long I'd been a hermit and everything, and why I wanted to get this turned over. Maybe that was in my request letter. But, and then in the meantime, though, I went through the process. I developed a very thorough process for the diocese, and I went through it myself. So it meant lots of writing, questionnaires to fill out, to answer thoroughly, including a whole range of topics regarding hermit vocation and personal, what I would know and did and already knew. And because I did one for an existing hermit candidate and also for a new to the hermit life candidate, should they ever get one of those. So, so a lot of work went on. I worked on it for several weeks. Lots of writing and praying about, what to include, how to formulate it, so that using a review committee of 3 people, a priest and 2 others, and on and on. I'm not going to go through the whole process I developed. But, with my doctorate in organizational leadership and my professional work as a assistant projects director for a large school district, and also then on review teams for the state of California, going around to school districts and analyzing if schools had implemented programs and projects correctly. If not, then they wouldn't get their funding. But we would write up recommendations. They had so long to improve and that kind of thing. So, I was on that. I was on multiple interview committees. So I know how to develop questions to interview someone, and also how to analyze the interviewee, what to look for in their body language, in the way they answer, and in the content of their answers. But I had stopped with that. I hadn't gone as far as developing questions for the review team for a hermit, or tips on how to analyze. I'd felt that would be better to do like a little in-service with the group, with the three of them, once they had their review team, and go over it more in person, because it's easier to give examples for me to role play, different like body language that I might project as an example for what they to look for on someone who would be insecure or who wouldn't be really sincere, or content to know whether the person, even as a prospective new to the hermit vocation, had they even investigated much. Or facial features, when you hand them the requisites for a hermit that would be based on the actuality of canon law, when they would read that they would not be wearing a habit, that they were to remain hidden and not to stand out, and they would not have a title of sister or brother, because that belongs to religious order people, and especially not in their first year or 15 months. I had 15 months myself of practicum, just to see, how they would react to that. Because I know for a fact from some couple of people who are wanting to be canonically approved, but who one already has a bolt of fabric and knows what kind of a habit she wants to sew for herself, so that is, and isn't even near ready to request canonical approval. And that was just, but also wants people to donate more money to her to provide for her. And, but is unwilling to lower lifestyle to afford where she is, or to move to a less expensive area. So, or a less expensive dwelling even. So, that right there, the person would probably balk when those things would be stated would not be part of their hermit vocation. And also, like not to be charging for spiritual direction. They need to make their money other ways, because they are not licensed therapists. They are not yet, years, 20 years or something, or 15 years of spiritual enlightenment or even experience, from basically being approved and the next day. And of course, if they're hidden, how would they advertise that they were going to do spiritual direction for people anyway? So that would just cut all that out. All that temptation to be Sister Shyster or Brother Bilker, or breaking the law. It's illegal to do therapy without a license, and that includes end of life. You can get away with end of life if you've gone through hospice training, but then you will be supervised by the hospice people if you go through the training and get your certification, which needs to be reviewed. And you will be given the people that you will help in their end of life process. So, we can't be slipshod. We're talking about the Catholic Church. It has enough bad press already than to have these loopholes going on, these inconsistencies, and really unconscionable, lacking in character, hypocrisies that other people pick up on, such as living with others or having a job where there's too many people around. somebody already wrote and got on the nerves of one that I know of who's running a retreat center. And someone wrote and commented about it. A friend of hers, she wrote about it, a friend of hers, in a newsletter and was offended, took offense. Well, someone was being honest and pointing out something that is a reality, that is an inconsistency for a hermit to be surrounded day and night by people and visiting with them all the time, whenever. So, which of course the people like, they find it's charming, very sweet person, and had been in religious life, so would, and very, very spiritual, and would have a lot to talk about. But it's not hermit, though. See, it's just not hermit. It's not silence. It's not solitude. It misses the point. So, anyway, but person took offense and then tried to justify what she was doing. And it just doesn't work. It didn't fool the friend who wrote to her. It has never fooled me, because I've read the canon law and know what it says. So, that's just one thing. That's an inconsistency right there. And the person hasn't benefited from the solitude and the silence that goes in with a hermit vocation. So, or the hiddenness. Person wears a habit, goes by a religious name, never left it when she left a convent, just kept on. So, even though is no longer in the convent, has a different habit than what they wear at that convent, but still calls herself by her sister name. So it's just misleading. And so I find lots of that. And so I've been praying about that, and I've been praying, asking the Lord, do you even like this canon law? Do you want me involved in this canon law? It's just so tainted. It is all over this country anyway. Different ways that sometimes a bishop will do the approving, which I think is probably for the best if they know the person and if they have good insight. But if they, like in my case, gave over the job to a very young priest who, from what I gained in the end, it wasn't the end really, but something that he sent me finally after 3 months was just so bizarre. In one part has this notion of hermits being recluses. I was not to use my laptop at all or any digital devices. No communication. Not texting not using my phone to text, not my laptop for email. Like I was talking to Father Vincent yesterday, going over all this and telling him, because I hadn't been able to get a hold of him prior, to tell him that I had decided I wasn't going to proceed with it because of just the nonsense, really. Oh my goodness, the young priest hadn't even read all the stuff that I wrote, or even enough of it to know that I'd already been a hermit for 25 years. So was approaching it like, I had no knowledge and didn't even discern yet that I was to be a hermit. Hadn't read about the Lord calling me to it, choosing me, or the time that I was chastised by my angel in early February into January 2007, because I had gotten involved with parish work, trying to help build up. I'd started a Padre Pio prayer group that the Lord thwarted in a very strange way. Loads of people came, But the priest that agreed to be the sponsor, you have to have a sponsor when you go through the official San Giovanni Rotondo Padre Pio prayer group, official. And we'd been sent this big certificate from San Giovanni Rotondo that I had framed. I'd spent personally over $1,000 buying books for everyone and on his life and some of his sayings, and making notebooks for everyone with some of his special prayers and other aspects of what was expected of us from the official Padre Pio prayer group organization over in Italy. And I get there, like 48 or 50 people show up from the area, which is a big group for a first time, for a prayer group. People were very interested and willing and desirous to do this. And this priest, he wasn't so young, he was maybe 40. He told me I could not lead the group. I did have an assistant who had wanted to help me get things organized, which was great. But then she tells me that she is deathly afraid of being in front of people, and she could not. So she tried her best, bless her heart, but it just flopped. And then I was even told I wasn't allowed to be there. I had to leave. And so she got through it, she told me, but barely. And then the next time she told me maybe 10 people came. It was just a flop. And she says, I can't do it, I'm quitting. And that was the end of it. And I did go to did I go to the parish and get that? Did I get that back? I don't know if I took it off the wall or not. I'd paid for it, all the frame. It was an expensive frame. I had it professionally framed because it was a size from Italy, so I couldn't get just a store-bought frame that would work well with it. And anyway, I think I have one of my Christian artworks framed in it now, but I left the certificate there in the parish office in case, I don't know, if the priest was going to notify them that they were defunct already. He gave me no reason for not letting me lead it. It was weird, other than I think he feared me, because I saw into him, and he was the one that later on I ended up having to report. He was a porn addict, and he was grooming a teen, had been for several years, and had made plans in advance for when the teen was going to college. He had planned to get a hotel room and seduce him, have sex with this poor kid. And now this is a warning, just if any priest ever has your son. He was an only boy, and I think they had 2 children. A daughter was older, this couple, in the parish. But they were so proud and felt like they were special because the priest took special interest in their son and would have him over, and they'd be out, at a campfire out by his rectory, and late into the night. I know this because after I realized, the Lord showed me what was going on with him, that he had this addiction. He's a porn addict, plus homosexual, and very attractive to young boys, prepubescent. But he had been working on this boy already for 3 or 4 years. And so I stayed all night at the parish. They had an overnight chapel. I would stay and keep watching. I would keep watch. And because another priest who knew about it told me I should not report it, that he wasn't acting on it. Well, oh, good grief. Yes, you are. If you're active into porn, and if you are, and the priest finally, later on, he admitted to me because I confronted him, and it freaked him out. And I told him how I knew through supernatural means, and had proof, told him I had been there the night before in spirit over his shoulder and saw what he was watching. It was horrible on his computer. And indeed he had been. So, so I think ahead of time, though, he was very wary about me. I had been talking with him. He had been spiritually guiding me before I realized all these things, before the Lord showed me. Because the Lord had actually tricked me in a way to move there. he was otherwise excellent, excellent sermons and full of energy and doing a lot in the parish. It was all cover. So anyway, it's just an amazing situation. But don't feel proud if a priest takes a special interest in your sons or daughters and they spend much time alone with them. No, parents. Just and when everything came out, the parents left the parish. So, but you just can't do that. You can't trust people. They're human. They're human. And as it turned out, he had intentionally gone into priesthood, faked it with a bishop who had been in Boston and had been the one that had written the letter in Boston that brought attention, and he got exiled for it. With that, I forget the cardinal's name, Cardinal Law, who had all that scandal in Boston going on and knew of it, but he didn't like it that this priest, who then became a bishop, had brought it to the fore. And so things behind the scenes, it's the world, and the devil gets involved in churches. The devil will try, but no, this young man, he was good. He had me fooled for a while, but see, the Lord had brought me there for that assignment. The Lord did that with me, and a few times, not always just a priest, but usually something would be going on that wouldn't be right. And but then the Lord brought me in. I think that was a trial time period for me in my early years as a Catholic. But anyway, but he already knew, but for whatever reason, he would not let me lead that group. And later on, I realized he did not want the power of Padre Pio present in all these people in this prayer group in his parish. Well, Padre Pio was anyway, and the Lord was, because I knew and found out. And then when he was crossing the line too much, the Lord let me know I had to act then. The Lord gave me the time to act on it too. And I had enough information by then to be believed by the bishop and the vicar general. So, had I gone right away, they might have just discounted it. Because already from where I had come from, I had all those awful letters written about me because of the one priest in my hometown who preached against me. But long story, you heard me talk about it before in previous videos, but I've had a bizarre life. Especially as a Catholic, it got very difficult. But, and it still is, because I have to really trust the Lord. So these things were going on then with my hermit request to become legal, because I didn't want to be illegal, and I didn't want to not be able to identify as Catholic hermit, but I can't. So I submitted this over 3 months ago, and did all this work, wrote all these things out, and I even wrote more since I realized that this young priest wasn't going to, he called once, but it was more him talking. I did say a few things, like I explained to him, my spine situation and how my arachnoiditis had progressed, and I had arachnoiditis and was in bed much of the time, and and that I couldn't sit, and I couldn't be at Mass. I can't sit on those padded seats anyway, but definitely not now with my spine and my neck so bad. You see me in bed. This is where I eat. This is where I read. This is where I do my laptop, talk on the phone. If I stand to chop vegetables in the kitchen for 10 minutes, I'm back in here resting for a half hour to an hour. Because my mid back, I have vertebrae in the T11, T12, and L1 that are disintegrating. It's right above my fusion. So I have a lot of pain. And, and then my neck is so bad, I rarely drive now because I get spatial disorientation. And morning mass is right at busy traffic time. No way, no way. I physically can't. I explained this, but it's like he didn't even hear it. So this list of things, it was just bizarre. He obviously hadn't read anything I'd written. And in one aspect, wanted me to not use any mobile devices for any communication whatsoever, like a hermit is supposed to be a recluse. And then in the next couple of lines, or different directives, get involved in parish activities. Oh my goodness. I don't do well in parish activities. That has been obvious. The Lord, that was why I was chastised by my angel in early 2007, because in 2006, I had developed that Padre Pio prayer group. I had started a Catholic book discussion. I had tried other things, to get people involved and in spiritual life, more in spiritual life. And no, God thwarted anything. I had been banished from my soup kitchen that the Virgin Mary had me start, run out of my hometown. It was just, no. And then my angel said I had not been living nor honoring the hermit life that God had chosen for me and valued very much, was very stern with me to the point where I was just like devastated inside. And that's when I started my blogs. What was the first one called? The Complete Hermit. And, really focused in, and absolutely no more parish involvement or activities other than going to Mass twice a day. When I was well enough, when I felt well. Back then I could still sit. It was hard. But I could still sit. And that was before the ecstasies began. The ecstasies began like a year and a half later. But even then, that became such a problem that I was run out of parishes. Priests didn't like it. And I look back, and you have to discern and try to consider what God wanted. And I realized he didn't want me even in masses. That's when I really reflected more on the hermits that were called out into the desert, and that they were not in parishes. And the hermits, even St. Charles du Foucauld. Now, he was a priest, but he had to go for 2 years without Mass until he got permission from Rome to celebrate, at that time in the early 1900s, to celebrate Mass by himself. But he had to have an altar server, so a Muslim boy actually assisted him, who had befriended him. The little village realized that he meant no harm, that this Christian man didn't. So he was just living among them, or on the outskirts. But no, so it was just the craziest thing. And no way was I going to tell my friend, who has no other friends other than family, and one person who she helps, takes a bulletin to once a week, a very slow elderly woman. But my friend has a cross to bear that means she doesn't really have close friends or any social life. I've been her friend for 20 years. And she writes every night at 8 o'clock, be later at night her time, tells me what she did for the day. I suggested to her, let's read the daily mass readings and then we can discuss that. But her cross to bear is such, and the medication she's on, very brilliant person. And she's become so holy with her daily regimen. But she can't really just discuss. So she'll select a gospel or one of the other readings for the daily mass and write it, and then I'll discuss back to her, different thoughts I have on it. But then she tells me things that she did that day. And, or, her husband always takes her to the grocery, usually every day, or not every single, but mostly, and for an outing, and she doesn't drive, and just a lovely person. But no, I'm not going to tell her I can't communicate with her, so no, that my spiritual father of the 19 years of my hermit life and 25 years total, who is holy, 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 and right on. He's the one the very day after my vows in 2000 said, no, I don't want you to become odd. And he explained more, not reclusive, not strange, not pleasant around people, or fearful to speak or to be cordial, or so into it that you lose a sense of balance. He says you must remain balanced. And he says, and love will always, if something comes up that is required of you or asked of you, he says, hermits are to be hospitable if there is that need from someone. And he says, love is always going to be your rule, that, your guidance to choose love. So yes, I will. And I had told Father Vincent when he called yesterday that I said it's, if I had followed along with this young priest's ideas, notions, I said I wouldn't be able to talk with you, Father Vincent. And he's, handling my spiritual direction if I need now. So, my spiritual father early on, when I was being given a terrible time by this first priest, and my spiritual Ada, at the time, I had just met him and I knew him for a few months, and he found out how I'd been so mistreated by this first priest. And he said, why would you he says, you're not to let a priest abuse you like that, mistreat you. He says, why would you let that? And I honestly thought, as a new Catholic, and I told this old my Irish my old priest director, I said I thought that as a convert to Catholicism, that somehow this was something that every convert was put through, this kind of mistreatment, to see if you have what it takes to be a real Catholic. And Father looked at me with this horror on his face. And he says, no. He says, the Catholic Church isn't supposed to treat people like that. It's to be loving and Christian. And he said, no, he says, never let a priest be that way. And walk, he says, if that had been me, how he talked to you, he says, I would have just walked out of that room and never come back. And I just was, but I honestly thought that I was being put through some kind of a review of some sort, like this hermit review. But I knew, that it wouldn't be like that with this hermit thing. But it wouldn't have been. I wouldn't have even lasted out as long as I did. But I lasted out too long. Somebody not even responding when you're handing over your vocation of already a quarter a century of your life lived it, and by esteemed priest and an esteemed, the confessor's 2 years older than me, and ended up being a Monsignor, and a bishop. If any of those persons, plus my spiritual father, had thought that I didn't have a vocation to the hermit life, they would have told me within the first 2 or 3 months of the 25 years I've been a hermit thus far. But it was obvious this young priest, he doesn't have a grasp. I think he downloaded something from online and then just fit in with me with it. But no, even before I got that uh, letter, I just thought, and it wasn't anything approving or disproving me at all. I had already discerned that this was too bizarre, too strange, and that the Lord was speaking. No way. Then I also came to mind what my spiritual dad had told me another time. And no, I think it was back with that situation. After he was horrified, he says, and said, "Don't you ever let a priest mistreat you like that." He says, "That isn't how, priests are to be to people." But he said, and he had this thick Irish brogue, did Father, and he says, "God gave you a brain, girl. You're supposed to use it." And so I think in this situation, I was trying to use it, but I've had visions and locutions over the years regarding my hermit life. But I didn't have enough faith. I was too queasy to fully trust, especially the one that was like 12 to 13 years ago, where God lifted me up and looked through. And but another thing that I remember now about it was the bishop was standing but not facing the tabernacle. The tabernacle was behind, the bishop there, an exaggerated pile of volumes that were canon law volumes, of which in reality there's only two thick ones with 1,752 canon laws, maybe more by now. But the volumes were up past this bishop's waist, and he was in his most formal of bishop garment with the hat, the whatever it's called, not just a zucchetta, not just the round cap, but the peaked thing they wear for high masses and things, so feast days and such, solemnities. And then this young hermit, way too young, that he had approved within 3 months of moving to the diocese, this bishop approved this young woman, who then approved her to live at her parents' home, and she wore a very austere, rather dramatic habit. I'll put it that way. I won't get too much into it, but I've explained it before. But she was on a kneeler, I think barefoot or with sandals, but no socks or anything. And this very solemn, extremely exaggerated, serious, forlorn. They were both looking at it. I don't know what the bishop's face looked like, but I could see from the side this young woman's, who had been approved as a canonical hermit, supposedly first in the history of this particular diocese. And they were looking at this oversized corpus of Jesus on a cross, extra bloody. The whole thing was very exaggerated. God said to me, as he had me suspended 20 feet up in the air, looking through the outer brick wall in and through the wall of this church altar area. And God said, it was so emphatic. You don't forget these things when you have a vision. And it was, especially if, as we've read from these early hermits and saints, if it's actually from God, you'll feel it all. And so God said, why would you want that when you can have me directly? now, he added now, when you can have me directly now. Why would you want that? Just, like that. And like, oh, and no way did I want that. Just the extremism and the youth and the exaggerated scene and the garment that the young woman was wearing that was, had some slits in it, and, just overdone. And I knew the person, and it hadn't worked, was living at home, and just a large family. She was the youngest, but lots of nieces and nephews and family gatherings, and all those canon laws, the exaggeration of it, it was ludicrous. And of course, no, I didn't know, to have God directly, and just the joy and the love. There was no doubt. It was like God was asking me a rhetorical question, like, no way, of course not. Don't want that. So that had been coming back to me, though, but it was hard for me to understand. Here the church now has this canon law that is the norm, and it is the legal way. And if you're not in the legal canon law way, you're not legal. You can talk your way around it, but if you're not legal, you're illegal or not legal. Or as this woman who's been writing these things says, you can call yourselves non-canonical or a lay hermit. Well, there's no such term as a lay hermit. She made that up. But non-canonical, that's non-canon, non-church law. Illegal, not legal. Just say it, I'm not legal. And so then I thought, so I've been praying about it. God, do you even consider this law something that you like or that you ever wanted or approve of? Do you approve of it? And then with all the inconsistencies of how the different bishops approve people, and then the ones that aren't being supervised by their diocese at all, or the ones that are, but the bishops seem to allow all kinds of things that aren't in the canon law, like living together, or these startup hermit orders and communities. When religious orders go through a lengthy 40 to 60 years of process and reviews along the way before they finally can be considered a valid community order by the Vatican. But here these hermits just start up. I guess they feel, we're legal, we can do what we want. And the bishops don't seem to understand. Maybe they never had anyone in their diocese or didn't have know of anyone who started a religious order to know the process you go through, the reviews, the expense of it even. You just can't just do it without going through this Vatican committee, or it's not a committee, but it's a actual, I don't know what you would call it, but a group, a part of the Vatican, someone's job there, a whole group's job of religious orders and religious life, consecrated life, but for religious orders and communities to get properly approved over a long period of time. I knew of a community in Avila, Spain. They were in that process. They'd already been in, I think, 20 years of it, and still weren't. They had another big review coming up where people from the Vatican would come and go through everything. They had to toe the mark. And she said maybe after 50 years, they were hoping to finally be validly approved as official. So it was just, it's this canon law thing is just goofy from what I researched of it myself. But there it is in the church now. And so I felt like I needed to be part of that. But then when I remembered, different things in praying about it, and then I got this note, what this priest wrote out for me, and I realized he hadn't read a thing. He wasn't ever going to meet me face to face. He had no interview and didn't have one planned. And I thought, Father, my dear spiritual Da, would say, absolutely not. You cannot give over your life to someone who you've not even met face to face, especially not someone that young. He's been a priest, I think, 4 years, 6 years maybe at most. And that he's had struggles. I researched him online to try to figure out who is this person who's going to be ultimately making this major life decision for me. And I have this added little quirk of being a mystic on top of it, with mystical experiences that take someone with a lot of years of experience probably before they're going to come across a goofball like me. It's at least all the priests I've met so far, and the bishop and the vicar general in my first diocese, and all those priests who knew me for close to 20 years in person, and then of course my Da for 25 years he knew me before he passed then, and even Father Vincent, they didn't call any of my references. No. And then just this ridiculous hypocrisy and inconsistencies in what he wanted me to do. Part of it I can't even physically do, and I explained that to him. He couldn't remember. And a prayer he said over the phone was rather gave me a lot of pause. He's stressed. I know someone in my neighborhood who knows him, who works at the university and knows of him and has seen him around and knows the scuttlebutt. And word is that he's in over his head. He's got way too much on his plate that he can't get accomplished. But he has wonderful intentions, and he has a master's degree from a school. I mean, schools vary. So, and some are more difficult than others. But then this chancellor told me that when I wrote him and said, well, he hasn't even read what I wrote, any of it. Probably not even my resumes, obviously. And he says, well, you need to put things just in short phrases, just a few lines and bullet points for him to be able to read it. Oh, good grief, I have a master's in reading. And so here's somebody who has reading etiologies, evidently, can't read sentences or paragraphs, or not without difficulty, and can't comprehend or can't remember, evidently phone call, verbal. So I just looked but he's a lovely priest. He's a lovely person, and they love him, and he is well-intentioned. I called it sincere ineptitude. But I could just hear my spiritual father saying, God gave you a brain, and use it, girl, and use it. So I did, and I wrote, and I said, thanks, but no thanks. I'm happy to be an illegal hermit. I will, throughout the rest of my life, which, who knows how long I'll live. Could be, I'll be retested in the spring for multiple myeloma or whatever else might be wrong with me by then. I could be dead. And but no, I couldn't comply with really anything of what he thought I needed to. One thing he wanted me to be rid of this woman who harasses online. And since I will be a Christian hermit, but I'm going to do the narrow way. I'm focusing on that. And so I'm going to focus on the early hermits and the early church um, masters of the spiritual life, maybe through the Dark Ages. I don't want to get too far into the Middle Ages, other than Saint Bernard, his Law of Love and his treatise on love. Possibly, I'll probably do Saint Francis de Sales, but not going to get too into more later Middle Ages into our, later times here, getting closer to us, and focusing on asceticism, the narrow path, because I could see already the Lord, and then bringing back that vision. And I have been very upset this weekend, very upset. I could have spared myself 12 to 13 years had I, definitely the last 5, had I fully trusted that vision. But that stuck in my mind, what if God just meant that for that diocese with that particular bishop, since I knew the young woman, knew of her, and I knew that parish back in the Midwest, that was for then and those people. But here I am here now in a different place, a different diocese, and a different bishop, different group. And I thought, how incongruous, though. Here's this canon law now that back then was not as established and not the norm. Now it is. And there's more coming out about it now, such as you cannot be consecrated. You're only consecrated if you are a canon law hermit. Well, that is a conflict for me because God consecrated me. So do I go with the canon law and the temporal Catholic Church, a bishop consecration, or God's consecration? What does God want? Well, God hasn't told me, forget my consecration and do the bishops, or it's okay to have the bishops, or you're not consecrated since you're not canon law. But just by the tone of how God had asked that back then, I knew back then he was not impressed whatsoever. Why would you want that when you can have me directly now? So I feel terrible that I just think of all that I missed out on by not totally trusting a vision that, after we've just gone over these, that I realized was a right-on vision and locution. Absolutely. And at the time, my spiritual father said yes, So, but I tested it. I prayed. I asked the Lord, please understand that I felt cornered here. That I can't identify as a Catholic hermit, but a Christian hermit. Actually, it's been bringing blessings. And I realized that Jesus is delighted. He's honored. In fact, today, I didn't realize, is the day of Jesus, the Divine Master, feast day. Not in the Universal Church, but the Pauline order. The order of St. Paul, that like the daughters of St. Paul and the whole Pauline media order, they have several arms of that order, of that whole umbrella, by a Father James or Monsignor James, somebody, I think he's blessed and maybe even going to be a saint pretty soon, who started that back in the early 1900s to use media, the media of the day, to spread the gospel. So they celebrated that today. Jesus, the Divine Master. And I'm a Christian hermit now. I said I will be that through the rest of my life, however long it is or however short. I will be a Christian hermit so that I do nothing against your canon law, and but that I am declining any progression with it. I'm relinquishing it. And I explained to this chancellor, I talked more with him, that I realized that vision and locution was for all time, anywhere, any diocese, no matter what. God does not want me affiliated with Canon Law 603. Nothing to do with it. And so I'm going to obey that. And I pray God accepts my deep, deep remorse. Because, at my age, losing 11 or 12 years of, although he's what I had during the island years, was God alone with me. But I kept trying to see if I could go to Mass in parishes. But these priests and parishioners can't take it. They cannot cope with someone who looks like they're just asleep in the pew. And it's a strange phenomenon how they react to a mystical phenomenon, even though it's rare. But that's one thing yesterday. Oh, that was the other thing. In the one phone call over 2 months ago from this young priest, when I told him about the ecstasies during Mass, and that, prior that was a reason why I had ceased going. I was just getting so injured. And in fact, that's why my neck is so bad now. The accident did a little, but the injury of the last Mass, when I was at the cathedral in the Midwest, Father Vincent happened to have that Mass. And he said, right as he held up the host at the consecration, he saw these people around me, not many, like 3, and my neck at an awkward angle because they had messed with my head. They had pulled it up and let it go, but they pulled it up past the axis of gravity, and my head just dropped down. The weight of a bowling ball is the head, the doctor told me later. He says, I was lucky my neck wasn't broken and they hadn't killed me. But I had terrible neck for 8 weeks. I was out of commission with my neck and terrible concussion. And dyslexia, I couldn't read, I couldn't write, I couldn't type, the letters would just jumble. Couldn't drive. And I never went back. I'd called the rector, and he never returned my call. But he had already told me he's got OCD, and he was really bothered that I couldn't stand up during the gospel. Somehow that external posture of standing during the reading of the gospel made him think that he didn't like that. It was out of order. He said, it's out of order. Out of order. So, there's only so much a person can do. So I'm a Christian hermit. I promise the Lord, I will be the desert hermit that he's wanted me to be. But in this time period, and in my locale, everything will be calibrated to that. And love, though, I think Father, my Irish Da, is correct. That when it comes down to decision of love, my relationship with my children hasn't been the best. They love me. Too much suffering and responsibility when they were little, and right after a divorce too. And them having so much to handle, and with the amount of pain I was in, with no medication for 17 years. So other than Tylenol, which is a drop in the bucket. They went through a lot. And then I would on occasion then be given injections that would knock me out. When it got so bad, there was a doctor in my hometown who finally realized, that I was in excruciating pain, and he arranged to have a home health care nurse come. But then he stopped that because, he was getting worried because my sieges were about every 3 weeks apart. So, and they're more funny about that kind of thing in Indiana. They're one of the strictest states. So, but God bless them for the few times that I had relief, but I would be knocked out, and that would worry especially my little one. He'd get afraid, that I was going to die or something. But then when I wouldn't have medication and the pain was so terrible, they would all be concerned. Would they wake up and have a mother? Or would she be dead in her bed? So it's really a horrible thing for them. And it has effects on them as an adult. And even to see me can bring back a lot. It's a PTSD thing with their own mother. It's hard. But here's this one daughter who so wanted mom to come and watch her play at her sport. And she had developed this big tournament, first in this area, only one. And so I went. But it was a sacrifice for me. I suffered physically, the standing. And I'd alternate trying to sit on hard benches work better. But still, it was really rough. But I did it, and I was thrilled to do it. I was so honored that she wanted me there. And I was so glad I was there because at the end, that unfortunate situation occurred. And it was just good to know that she wanted me there, that it meant something to her. And some photographer even took our photo together, which is rare for me to have a photo with her, and I rarely see her. She travels all around and then she works hard. So drilling, training, practicing, and she teaches. She teaches the sport and runs clinics around the country. So that was a love decision to do that. And it was the right decision. But see, that wouldn't have been allowed had I, gone by this young priest. But yet he'd want me involved in parish activities. Start getting involved in parish activity. Oh, dear Lord in heaven. It was just so bizarre. I knew God was in it. When something is that extreme, and then back to the thing with the ecstasy. During this prayer, this priest was saying on the phone with me, the first part of it was so fast I could hardly understand, except I recognized he was stringing together little phrases of devotional piety, just one after the other, whether they connected or not. And then I could hear him start saying, asking God to deliver me from these evil ecstasies that kept me from participating fully in the Mass. And when I told Reverend Vincent about that, he honestly, he started just laughing and laughing. He says, "You're kidding. You're kidding me." I said, "No." And I said, "He's never met me. He's never experienced that. And Father Vincent saw me in ecstasy many times." so, and the bishop there and the Reverend Monsignor, because at first I was scared that the devil was doing something to me. And no, I begged for an exorcist. Please get an exorcist. They would have had to, it was in the Midwest, they would have had to get somebody from Chicago. But I was begging. No, the bishop said, absolutely not. He says, you are the furthest thing from any, from being possessed or having anything like that going on. He says, no, this is from God. We just, never experienced this before, never knew of anyone with it. Same with my Da. 72 years a priest, he had never known of anything like of it. But he read, and he got from Blessed Dom Marmion and was no longer then concerned and told me not to be concerned that I wasn't getting a consecrated host, that God was feeding me, that I was being fed supernaturally. And that's why I never feel any yearning or like I'm lacking. even now, I'm always, and I used to before, if I would miss Mass, I would call, ask people, please bring me communion, and because they knew I was a daily person and even twice daily. And especially in my own hometown, there was always a Mass once a day there with two parishes. One had like 3 mornings a week, and the other would have the 2 weekday nights. They always had a Saturday morning and then Saturday evening. I could go every day. So somebody would always bring me communion if I was having a pain siege. And so that was very lovely of them to do that. But ever since those ecstasies, I was subsumed into the Mass. I became part of the Mass, and I lived it so deeply that it's like it's never left me. So, but I used to just yearn for the Eucharist before that happened. And even until, but when it went on for 2008, let's see, it would be 220, 12 years, then I still had them. And then I had all those surgeries in a short period of time. And then the priest was getting real uneasy, and people were starting to get uneasy. And I thought, plus they had me in a room with a screen, which was just pointless. I have my screen here to watch Mass online. So, and I haven't needed to. In fact, it is so remote to see it online. I like see it. When I was in ecstasy, it was like I was at the altar and in it. And even now, I'm still subsumed in the Mass. So I read daily all the scriptures, because that varies daily, the Mass readings, and then usually something written by a saint on the readings. So I have like a little sermon. But anyway, but no, it was just, so no, so this is my future then, and I will be a Christian hermit, and will focus on the spiritual life as more arduous and out in the desert. Removed, so the temporal Catholic world is not going to be part of my sharing. I don't think I'm going to bother with truth matters. I'm going to let the woman, you guys can discern. It's still Song Hermitage. If you want to read what she writes, you just have to know what she's talking about yourself to discern it for truth. And it's a lot of word salad, I will tell you that. A lot of words. And a lot of it so far is justifications for what she wants to justify of her own hermit life, which is marginal compared to the canon law. Well, not necessarily in their spiritual life, but in all the externals anyway. So, and I don't know. Of course, I disagree with some of what she wrote about. Her latest thing was something about not going to Mass. And I would think, if I hadn't had those ecstasies for 12 years, every single Mass, any place, any church, any Catholic church, I would, I think I would still very much yearn the Eucharist, and I would need someone to bring it to me. Bring the tangible, temporal consecrated host. Not temporal, but the tangible consecrated host from Mass. And if I ever do have that sense of loss or hungering, I will call some parish, or the one that I signed up with, see if they have somebody. Or maybe the man in the neighborhood would bring me communion. You have to be a Eucharistic minister, but he might know of somebody. But I'm fed supernaturally. And I'm sure God will let me know if I'm not. And that's the other thing. God has chastised me when I've gotten off my hermit. God handled his hermits just fine. I'm convinced, at least for myself, that God doesn't think a whole lot about this temporal canon law. Especially when I read up about this Bishop Remy Daru of Canada. He was involved in starting Catholic Action Dissenter Group. Just the way it was started and the motive it was started for back in 1983 isn't really a spiritual reason. And it just, anyway, this is my path, and it took a lot this weekend to get over my own upset with myself for not having trusted God. But I think surely and hopefully he understands knowing how fastidious I am about these things, and, sort of worry over to make sure that I'm doing things correctly, that especially with visions and locutions, you have to be very careful with them. That I would think, what if he didn't mean that for every place? So I know now he does. He meant it for me for every place. And I'm sharing this. It doesn't mean it's for all of you, because I before have said, well, if you don't want to be illegal, you have to be canon law. But I'm fine being illegal. I realized, God loves me. Jesus has accepted me as his Christian hermit, and his mother is thrilled. She is delighted. I am giving honor to her son by being a Christian hermit. Catholic is actually a nickname. It was a name used from starting about 70 AD to 110 AD is the time period that people started calling Christians Catholics. So it's a nickname. And I find Christian to be spiritually elevated over a nickname such as Catholic. So, and God isn't concerned about my proselytizing or anything. He wants me for himself, to lead me to where he wants me spiritually, into pure love. So, not involved in the temporal Catholic world. It's a compromised world. We're sinners, but he's pulled me out of it. So I have to be concerned about my own personal sins, but at least I'm not going to be sinning in regard to the temporal Catholic Church. I'm not going to be involved with it. But I'm in the body of Christ because I'm a follower of Jesus Christ. And I am confirmed a Catholic. I'm baptized. It's baptized in the Methodist Church, but it's Trinitarian, so that counts for the Catholic Church. So I am focused on God, Christ, the Holy Spirit, Jesus' mother, who dispenses graces and teaches me much about humility also, but being gentle and loving of her son, and also to do my mission. So that's where I'll go with these videos now, and I think I'll still be Joyful Christian Hermit. Maybe add of the narrow path, something like that, or narrow path Christian Hermit or something. But I feel like I need to keep Christian in there to redound to the glory of Christ, the name that is exalted above all names on heaven and earth, the name to which all are to bow. So what a better hermit to be than to be Jesus Christ's hermit, a Christian hermit, God's hermit, the Holy Spirit's hermit, and to be God's directly now. I am His directly. If He will have me, if He will forgive me, and the wasted years, not all of them, but definitely the last 5 I've been, monkeying around. And then when I was also trying to get back in, to be accepted in parishes and stuff, the desert hermits went out to the desert for reasons. And they were not in parishes anymore then. So I had to learn that and understand that and accept it. That God wasn't against me on that, and that God wasn't going to hold it against me that I wasn't in parishes and that I wasn't involved in the Temporal Catholic Church. And I agree with this young priest that I need to be rid of this woman. And the way to do it is I'll have nothing to do with, she won't have any issue with me as a Christian hermit, because I'm outside of what she's promulgating and promoting, which is the canon law. What is her purpose in life, which is canon law 603. So, and I realize, since I'm not involved in the temporal Catholic world, it's reader discernment time. I already did a video on that. We have to do that for everyone and everything, and also listening. And I'll trust you to leave comments if you think I'm saying something that is off or not scriptural or something. So, or not of God, Pray for me too. Please pray for me. This is a huge step in my life. Huge step. To totally let go. I've wasted really 20 years, 19 and a half or 19. I had a vision and locution of the entangling nets. The entangling nets represented the temporal church with all these people in it, just beneath the surface, huge nets. I was treading water desperately, trying to get them open to help the people. And God said, no, leave that. You swim on out into the deep. I'll take care of them. And I stuck with that for a while, but it wasn't much longer that I was, involved trying to bring good to the temporal Catholic parish I was in. The one where this priest, blocked things that I was trying to do that were good. Or God blocked, even like with the diocese-wide, not diocese, but the whole area of where the cathedral was. There were several parishes involved, but it wasn't the whole diocese, but it's just in this one city. I advertised these Catholic book discussion groups. Only one person came, and that's the woman in the daytime when I had my best friend couple came in the evening. But in the daytime, only one, and it was this woman who's been my friend now for 20 years, the one that has such a cross to bear and needs a friend, and she's about my only friend, Catholic and spiritual wise. I have one other really close one, but I've limited. They respect that I'm a hermit, and but I emailed the one. She was one of my references, another reference, back in the Midwest, and told her, and so. And we don't speak that often, but she's known me for years. And she said, no one contacted her. Father Vincent was disgusted. No one contacted him. Before proceeding with all these things that I'm to do, you have to at least sort of have a one-on-one with the person. Or the person needs to have read enough about your life and also know some about the hermit life. If he had bothered a face-to-face, I could have explained about how the early hermits wrote letters, St. Charles de Foucauld, he wrote letters and letters and letters. If it had been today, he would have done emails or texted people, his sister. And that's what his books are written from, are all his letters and his notebooks that he kept. So he used computers. He would. He would use digital devices in today's world. And we wouldn't have had all these wonderful writings if they never wrote anything or communicated. So, it's just naivete. As I say, it was very conscientious young priest, very conscientious. Autocratic leadership style, which is the least effective of leadership styles. And that's probably, it can cause, if you don't delegate well, you'll get overwhelmed with all you have to do yourself then, when you place yourself over everything in charge, and so even collaborating with me on goals or something would be good. I could have let him know, well, a 1 year to discern if I have a vocation. That happened 25 years ago, and it was more than a year. So, and if you call these people, you'll find out, But I could have explained to him about the early hermits, and that if he had read what I wrote, he wanted me to read, and he listed 3 hermits. He wanted me to read so I could start learning about hermits. And they were 3 that I read like 24 years ago, and I've read so many more, and I'd written about all these different ones I'd read, but he didn't read it, see, so he didn't know. So I couldn't even do that because I'd already done it, I already know about hermits he's probably never heard of and never will. So it just was bizarre. And when things get that bizarre, the Holy Spirit's involved. And God was making it so extremely ridiculous and nonsense that I would realize, drop this thing like the slimy thing it is, or what, it's not slimy, questionable or whatever, incoherent, inconsistent, or strange, like a strange creature. That's what I mean, a strange creature. Drop that strange thing. The hypocrisy in it, and the stuff I couldn't even physically do, and so no, and there was no sense in getting in touch because he doesn't respond email either. And the secretary that sent me this into my email said, look, very nice, sweet, sound like a sweet, I could be all excited, look for this in the mail. They didn't even get my address right. And I know my address, so I had it on several documents. So, it was just every little step of the way was like craziness. And they're not stupid by any means. So, it was God's will. God was making this so clear to me that I am to remain a Christian hermit out in the desert, nothing to do with the temporal of the church, but very much with the spiritual church, the spiritual and mystical church, and the mystical body of Christ. And I thought about St. Bruno. He left Cologne, Germany. He had a bishop, maybe he's an archbishop, very envious and resentful of him. Bruno was a very talented and popular professor and priest in Cologne, Germany. Taught at the university. This was way back in like 1060 AD. And this bishop gave him a hard time, made his life miserable. And he had talked to some friends and said, I'm going, I just want to find God. I want to just be able to learn and love God. So I'm going to, at some point, leave. I want to go out, we're in a remote area. And his companions who were talking with him, they said, we want to come too. We want to come too when you, and he says, well, I can't go now. He wanted to get more things in order. And so about 6 years later, or 5 or 6, he left and they went with him. And he never wanted it to be an order. He wasn't a hermit, but he was living a life of solitude and prayer. Not solitude even, silence and prayer. These others were with him. And they had relative silence. You know, they had to speak now and then. And he was a priest, so he could celebrate Mass. Guijo I, who was one with him, wanted to, and I think other people joined too, but not that many, but they went in 1070, and ended up in the farthest reaches of the Alps above Lyon, France, and so very remote. And so I think it was maybe he was there 7 years or something, and things were going well, but the Pope wanted him to come to Rome to help him with the problem, because he was well known before he left Germany. And word did spread about, what he had started, that he was doing this. And so he went to Rome. He was older then. He became ill, and then he stayed in Italy at a monastery and died. And I console myself with him, because he was later in life when he did what he needed to do. Go out, away from the temporal. Really away. And then he got called in, but love prevailed. He felt sorry. The Pope, he wasn't going to go at first, but the Pope kept insisting and begging, I really need your help. You're the only one who can help. So he went, out of love, out of charity, and then became ill and passed. And he was older then anyway. In the meantime, though, even while he was alive, at La Grande Chartreuse, which they called their location, it was known as that when they went there. A bishop had given them that land there, or whoever owned it, I think maybe a monk or an abbot or somebody, it was part of their property, gave them that, but wasn't near them. They were isolated. But this Guijo, one of his companions, kept wanting him to create an order. Write statutes, we want this to be an order. Bruno refused. He did not ever want it to be an order. Soon as he died, though, Guijo started the process. And it took a while. The Vatican has to approve and all. So, and it's even more complicated now. The temporal Catholic world is more complicated now. And I hope that they get the Canon Law 603 tightened up. But it's none of my concern. God has made that clear. I'm not going to touch it, not with a 10-foot pole. I'm not going to read about it, nothing. In fact, I know pretty much what it all says. I'm going to let God direct me even in every aspect of what God wants to direct me directly. Guide me directly. And this is going to require a great deal of prayer and a great deal of interior focus, listening, and discernment. A lot of discernment. So that's my news. God bless His real presence in us, and pray for this young priest. I appreciate him so much because he is an instrument of God's will for me. He is a pure instrument of God's will for me. You understand how that works? That through the craziness of this situation, if it had not been for that priest and the way that this has unfolded, and even just what he wanted of me, and even that prayer, that strange prayer, and he was sort of breathless, and I felt he was stressed when he was talking, talking so fast, and then prayed it, and then he didn't seem to remember. So from every phase and facet of it, not God's will for me. So, but I'm happy to pray for any of you. If you, need to discern, just leave a comment. I need prayers, if I should be canon law or not. And I'll pray for you. I'll just pray for God's will, though. Because I sincerely want everyone, no matter what your vocation is to be where God wants you to be. After what I've been through and the time that I've spent. But I'm doing better tonight about it, and feeling that God will forgive me. He knows that I meant well, and I'll just go on from there. So have a beautiful rest of your evening, morning, whatever time of day.